BlackMovies.com. We are your hosts, Jeff and Diane, and this is movie number 6, Blackmail from 1929. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. This is our first sound movie. This was Hitchcock's first sound movie. The previous 5 movies we've covered have all been silent films, as you are all well aware. This was Britain's first sound movie, which is probably kind of an honor. I guess it was just timing. It's also probably the answer to a trivia question. What is Britain's first sound movie? Blackmail. Hollywood's first successful sound movie was The Jazz Singer from 1927, so from a couple years before. Probably the first real sound movie with synchronized music and synchronized sound effects was Don Juan. I'm thinking from the year before even. So the technology had existed to make sound come to life with pictures, with moving pictures, for many, many years. It's just that the technology could never really break into the industry because it would always end up in a commercial flop. It was a great way for a studio to lose a lot of money, was to get into this sound technology. This movie made a lot of money. This was a big success for British International Pictures, and as a result, a big success for Alfred Hitchcock. This is based on an extraordinary theater hit, also called Blackmail, from the previous year. British International Pictures bought the rights to the play Blackmail with Alfred Hitchcock in mind. The play was written by Charles Bennett. Well, who's Charles Bennett? Charles Bennett was involved with writing 8 Hitchcock movies. That's pretty cool. We're going to talk more about him in later movie reviews, but suffice it to say for now that Charles Bennett wrote The Man Who Knew Too Much, 39 Steps, Secret Agent, Sabotage, a couple others. Oh, and one of our personal favorites, Young and Innocent. So that's neat. More on him later. So yeah, they bought the rights to this play for Hitchcock. Hitchcock then adapted it. So you'll see directed and adapted by Alfred Hitchcock, and he actually made this even darker than this successful play. The main actors in this movie are John Longden. Now he plays a young, handsome detective, a Scotland Yard detective in London. His character is Detective Frank Weber. That's him on the right. John Longden was in 5 Hitchcock films. This is probably the biggest role he had in those films. We'll see him later on in other movies. Second main character is Detective Frank Weber's girlfriend, Alice. And she's played by Annie Andra, which we remember from The Manxmen. She was Hitchcock's favorite blonde actress at the time. She plays Alice, the daughter of a London shopkeeper. The shop is in Chelsea, a part of London, and she's his daughter. More on Annie in a second. Third character is an artist. He's a painter played by Cyril Ritchard. Cyril Ritchard was very, very popular, very, very famous at the time. He was a musical star, a comedian, a man of many talents. He plays a painter in this one, and that didn't turn out real good for the painter in It Was Easy Virtue. That didn't end well for him. So he plays this artist that's interested in Alice, the girlfriend of Detective Frank Weber. And lastly, the blackmailer. After all, this movie is called Blackmail. We need a blackmailer. The blackmailer is played by Donald Calthrop. He is in 4 other Hitchcock movies. We'll see him again. And in 1935, he played, in the movie Scrooge, he played Bob Cratchit, a slightly less sinister role, the father of Tiny Tim. An actress of note in this movie, Joan Barry. You're not going to see her, but Joan Barry plays the voice of Alice, of Annie Andra. Why does someone else play the voice of Annie Andra? Well, this movie was supposed to be shot as, and was shot as, a silent film. So the fact that Annie Andra grew up in what is now Poland, and born in Poland, grew up in Prague with her German Czech accent was irrelevant. Now that it became a sound film, that was a bit of a problem. And just a backstory on that, yes, it was to be a silent film. It was conceived by Hitchcock as a silent film. All the shots he had in his head were for the silent film. And sort of towards the end, the studio came to him and said, hey, we've got all this great sound technology from the United States. We want you to shoot this picture, just the last reel of it, as a sound film. So they had to go back and reshoot some shots. Hitchcock went back and secretly shot a lot of the movie, well, a lot of scenes in the movie anyway. So throughout the movie there is this sound and this sound dialogue. Big problem for Annie Andra, because it just didn't make any sense for her character to have a European accent. So it was actually Hitchcock's idea to have an actress standing just off camera, holding a microphone, saying the lines as Annie Andra mouths them. So it's pretty awkward. I don't know how many takes it must have taken for some of these scenes, but as you're watching it, just note that every time Alice says something, it's someone else actually off camera doing it. Wow, they simply did not have the ability to dub in sound later. I mean, once the director said action, roll them, that's it. What you hear is what is on the film. So yeah, I can only imagine how awkward that was. So that was a problem for this movie. That was the first problem. The second problem is these cameras that they've been using up to these years, they're pretty big and they're really noisy. They made lots of noise as they were chugging along and squeaking, and the gears are grinding. So to make this sound picture and to make all these early sound pictures, they actually had to put the camera in a soundproof booth, like a box. So you're filming these scenes in a soundproof box through a plate glass window. So it's even a little bit fuzzy because of that. This was actually very unpleasant for the poor cameraman, because being soundproof and airtight, the camera giving off a lot of heat, within 5 minutes it was excruciating inside there. These poor guys were dying. There's this picture of Alfred Hitchcock beside the camera. That's Annie Andra, and that's the camera inside that little booth. So now that we've got the camera inside this booth, the camera cannot move. So all those great shots that we were seeing in Manxman and in, The Ring, where Hitchcock was bringing the camera to you and showing the action and making it less like a stage play, remember we talked about that? Well, guess what? Boom. Action. And the camera had to stay like this. So look for that. It could pan a few degrees, I think 30 degrees or something each way, but certainly not mobile. Couldn't really do it outside. It was certainly a real problem. Another problem with this is the directors used to yell at the actors, okay, now everybody move to the left, now look at the camera and smile and yell, now be sad. Well, you can't do that anymore because every sound is picked up by these microphones. So in some ways, this early advent of sound really was a negative impact on these movies, and they had to work it out. They had to figure out how they could do it. Getting back to Annie Andra, there's a clip that I'm going to link up just right below us here that I encourage you to watch even before you watch this movie, and it's an early sound test. It's delightful. It's Hitchcock just kind of teasing around. Apparently Annie Andra wanted to know what her voice sounded like on screen, on camera. And so they do this little sound test, and Hitchcock kind of embarrasses her a little bit. It's amazing how much hair he's got on his head in this scene, but I really enjoyed watching it. It's great that still exists. And they decided, no, we just can't hear her voice. So bummer. The actors also had to learn their lines. I mean, that's something that if they'd had a silent film career all these years, they had to learn their lines. So. Yeah, it really did signify the end of many careers, certainly in Hollywood, definitely in Britain. Mary Pickford being one. A lot of actors just did not have a career when movies started talking, including Annie Andra. I mean, after this film, she went on and made some films in Germany, but there was just no way that she could continue her very successful career. So why have sound? I mean, why bother with it? Well, because now they could, and audiences were starting to want it. We'll talk more about this at the end of the movie, but people really would rather see a sound movie. They'd rather see a bad sound movie than a good silent film. So the beginning of this film has just an outstanding orchestral musical sequence. I love it. It reminds me of what we're going to see much later when he was at the peak of his form in Vertigo or North by Northwest. Music that's sort of setting the tone, that's setting the suspense. Speaking of suspense, the first 8 minutes of this film you're about to watch is silent. It was filmed silent. And it's almost like Hitchcock is he knows the audience is sitting there waiting to hear dialogue, waiting to hear the sound, and it's almost like he's building up suspense. So just a quick word about this opening sequence. It's basically just showing you how the justice system, the wheels of the justice system work in London through Scotland Yard. It's basically just Scotland Yard catching a bad guy. It's called the Flying Squad. So you had this on-the-move truck, This was the unit that was devoted to really bad crimes, armed robberies, and assault with a deadly weapon, murders, that sort of thing. So yeah, they're just our two detectives going to get a bad guy, bringing him in, interrogating him, fingerprinting him, and finally locking him up. Now this was a process that we will see again in great detail in The Wrong Man, 1956, with Henry Fonda. Very, very well done then. Can't wait. That's a long ways away, but we'll get there. This whole process really terrified Alfred Hitchcock. The police terrified Alfred Hitchcock. It's a really neat story that he used to love to tell over and over and over when he was a little boy growing up in London, because this movie is filmed in his London. He was either 5 or 8 or 10 or something, depending on when he was telling the story. He was a bad boy one day, did something his father didn't approve of. His father knew the local sergeant in the jail, so he wrote a note and handed it to little Alfred and said, "I want you to go give this to Joe at the jail." And what the note said when Alfred gave it to the fellow was, "I want you to lock my boy up in the cell for 5 minutes, but don't tell him it's just going to be for 5 minutes." So, man, this guy said, "Okay," and put Alfred in the jail and said, "This is what we do with bad boys," and shut the door on him and left. Imagine the horror. Well, you don't have to imagine. You can have Alfred Hitchcock tell you this story many, many times. He literally was petrified of the police his whole life. He never drove because he was petrified of getting pulled over by the police and getting a ticket. Wow, it really is an amazing thing. So look for some very interesting and very creative uses of sound. He's not just throwing in sound for the heck of it. He definitely is using sound to tell the story and build suspense. It's almost like he says, well, great, we've got sound, but we're going to be cool about it. We're not going to overdo it, and he doesn't overdo it. It's excellent. Look for a cameo in this movie. We're not going to tell you where it is, but it's there. And that's it. So good. Let's on with the movie from 1929, Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail. Let's watch. Yeah.